Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and this is the games that I played in 2022. I'm going to be basically speaking on every game that I played last year, whether I beat them or not. And I'm using a little tag team here of my game completion list on my computer, and then PS Trophies app showing me every game that I played so that I can touch on everything. So, without further ado, because this could very possibly be a longer video, I'm going to just jump right on in. The very first thing that it shows that I played on January 1st, I played Clockwork Aquario. This was one of the games that I have bought from some of the limited run companies that were almost done or completely finished way back in the day, all in the 90s as far as I know, of the 3 or 4 that I've bought that were in this situation, was scrapped at the last minute due to console changes, changes in strategy, the transition from the 2D to the 3D gaming space. Clockwork Aquario was one of those that was then rescued by Strictly Limited Games. I bought this from them. I got it in. I was excited about it. I decided to pop it in and check it out. Apparently I did achieve 4 trophies. And the game as a whole only has 15 trophies available for it. But I do remember not being all that impressed with it as compared to some of the other ones that I bought that were in like this situation. Clockwork Aquario was probably my least favorite of one of these rescued games. The sprites are too big for me. It's a kind of a clunky platformer game, 90s style platformer game. The colors to the graphics and all that were just, I don't know, it was just simplistic and overly colorful. Even more so than what I thought it would be. That being said, I'm still glad that I bought it. I'm still glad that I supported a game in this situation. But Clockwork Aquario was the first thing that I played in 2022, and then I put it aside. And then I moved on to the first game that I beat in 2022, which is Nier Replicant version 1.22474487139. Silly naming convention for it, but I guess it gets attention. But Nier Replicant is the only game so far in the Nier series that I've played. I mean, there's really only just the original Nier Replicant, which was an altered version. It was more the Japanese version, and not the North American version that we got back in the day of Nier. And then there's Nier Automata, or Automata. I have yet to play that one. Partially because playing Nier Replicant and beating it doesn't mean really beating the game. There's multiple endings, and I've only done the ending A. I really enjoyed Nier Replicant, though. It was a really fun game. But I'll have to go back at some point and just give some time to those other endings before I move over to Automata. So that was Nier Replicant, last played on January 12th, it looks like. On January 20th, I played a game called Mulaka. This was a game from a very obscure little limited print company called First Press Games. And I bought it because the graphical style was interesting, 3D, like third-person graphical style, has like a kind of a tribal look to the characters, and the story is definitely from that type of a perspective. I don't remember if it's a made-up civilization or if it's based in like a historical time period, but it looked really, really nice. But the gameplay for it was kind of clunky, kind of sparse, kind of basic, and so I didn't really stick with it. It'll be a game I'll go back to But I really only messed around with it for a short period of time to kind of get a flavor on it. Excuse me. So the next thing I played was Thomas Was Alone. I only got one trophy on it. I think I just popped that one in because it was, because I had it on PS4, and I had originally played it for a while on Steam. It's an interesting game. It's just like a puzzle style game. It's an indie puzzle game that's little blocks, little square characters of different heights, different sizes and whatever, and I think there's up to like 3 of them that you have to control at one point to be able to move through the environments. It's not bad, but it's not the kind of game that I'd give any kind of massive time to, at least all at once. So I moved on from that to a game called Just Die Already. Just Die Already is the follow-up game to... Now I can't remember what the Just Die Already team did before it. I'm going to look real quick, because the people who made this made another game that I was familiar with. Oh, it's from the designers of Goat Simulator. I thought maybe it was, but it just didn't quite click that was who had done it. I played that one for a while. It's fun. It's an over-the-top, nonsensical physics sandbox style game where you play like an elderly person, and the whole game is like elderly people getting into mischief and, you know, crazy things like their arms getting ripped off or getting ran over by things, drowning in the ocean, all kinds of weird stuff. Maybe it even kind of sounds a little dark and morbid, but it's really just kind of like stupid fun like Goat Simulator is. So I gave it a little bit of time. I think I played it over the course of like 2 different days, just messing around with it, and then I moved on. And I moved on to Hitman, the original Hitman, of the newer trilogy, the World of Assassination trilogy. I really wanted to click with the Hitman games, and every time I play, I get a little way into it. Well, every time I've played the newer one, Hitman Absolution, I played a few years back, excuse me, on the Xbox 360, and actually had a lot of fun with it and beat that game. I've been having a hard time figuring out how to get through these. They give you such an open world, like an open sandbox to commit these assassinations in, and I find myself just kind of wishing it was a little bit more linear and not so free in terms of what you can do, because I want to just get through the level and move on to the next one. I want to see the whole game. I don't want to spend 20 hours in one level just trying to nuance every little assassination possibility. So the Hitman games are quality, and they're really, really well done, and I'm sure I'll get back to it again at some point in the future, but I put my time in on it. From this, it looks like I have 10 trophies out of 67 or something like that the game has. So I've got a little bit of it, but I'll just try it again, give it the old college effort again sometime in the future. So after Hitman, that was February 2nd. On February 3rd, I played a game called, I'm going to either say it's called Aria or Aria, but it's spelled A-E-R-E-A. And it's an interesting little game. It has kind of the isometric viewpoint on it, and it's in a world where you are like gathering up these instruments, and there's a lot of music-related attacks. But it's basically just going into these different levels and killing a lot of bad guys and unlocking things and getting to where you need to go. It's a real basic, simplistic, cheap style game, but I was enjoying it. But I got so far into it, and I had some sort of a bug of some type that basically halted all my progress. So I don't know if I'm going to ever get to go back to that particular game save and try to continue on, or if that one's just lost to time. But it wasn't too bad of a game. Another not too bad of a game, but one that I couldn't find myself sticking with was Tribes of Midgard. Played that in mid-February. Survival crafting style game that, if I remember right, because like it has been almost a year since I played it, I think you have to like build up your base wherever it is that you're establishing yourself, and then sometimes you have to stop like these waves of enemies, so I guess it's got a little tower defense to it. I don't really care for that kind of stuff. I think I got a little bit tired of trying to go out and gather resources and then, oh, well, my base or whatever is getting attacked, try to go back. There's not enough time in those games to really do what you need to do, at least for me to do what I need to do. And so I usually get put off of those kind of games pretty quick like. So I did move on to my second game completion of the year on February 18th, which was Infliction Extended Cut. That's a indie horror game that Limited Run Games put out. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I got roughly half of the trophies for it. A lot of room to go back and replay that game. It's not very long. It was a pretty decent game, though, in my opinion. I enjoyed it. Then I got my next game completion a month later on March 17th. I gave pretty much a month to Horizon Zero Dawn. That's the original Horizon game because the sequel was coming out, and I wanted to replay the original game because it had been, well, that came out in 2017. So it had been 5 years since I played it, roughly. So I wanted to replay that. So I played that for a month. No platinum. I have 74% of the trophies for it. But Zero Dawn's a great game. What can you say? Robot dinosaurs, alternate future, history style game. Very interesting story. It's definitely the best part of it is the weird amalgamation of future tech and sort of like tribal civilization. So definitely recommend Horizon games if you have PS4, PS5, and you haven't played them. They're well worth looking into. So after Horizon Zero Dawn, I dabbled in a game called Thief Simulator for a little while. I think that was something I saw someone on YouTube play, and it looked interesting, and it was cheap. It's a digital game, no physical copy, unfortunately. So I picked it up digitally. It's a clunky, what I was going to call it a reality game, but not reality game, like a sim game, a simulator style. Obviously, simulator's in the title, dumbass. I guess I should look a little closer at what I'm talking about. Thief Simulator. It's a sim game where you play a thief in a neighborhood. You have to avoid the residents of the houses that you break into, the cops, all that kind of stuff. The graphics are not the greatest, and the physics are not the greatest. But it's still decent fun. You can steal stuff from houses, sell it for money, upgrade the tools that you have, do bigger robberies, heists, and stuff like that. I only got 2 trophies, but I did play it for quite a while on the days that I did check it out near the end of March. Alright, the next game that I played was Dying Light 2, which was my 4th game completion of the year on April 7th. The sequel to Dying Light, which was the next game that the original creators of the Dead Island series made after they went on their own. We're finally getting Dead Island 2 sometime in 2023. I'm interested to just see what the game is like. I don't think it'll be as good as the first Dead Island games or the Dying Light games, but I'm still willing to give this new development team, the benefit of the doubt. Dying Light 2 was really, really good. I don't think it was quite as good as the original Dying Light, but I did love the city that they built, the world that they built. The characters were pretty good, although some of the ancillary characters that you deal with were kind of unusual. Think like some of the more unusual characters in a Far Cry game, but not quite as interesting, I guess. A little over the top. Excuse me. Dying Light 2 was an enjoyable game experience for me. It's one of those kind of open world games where I look forward to in a couple of years going back and replaying it. So after that, I played some Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. I had high hopes for Security Breach to be the next first-person survival horror style game where you're walking around in, in a place that's clearly haunted or filled with scary creatures. In this case, the animatronics from Five Nights at Freddy's. And I thought, this is like the perfect game series to do that. Five Nights at Freddy's games all have you sitting in one place, sort of doing like equipment management. And in this one, you just get to walk around as a kid and try not to get grabbed by any of the animatronics that are wandering around this. It's almost like a mall. Problem was, there's always like one of the main Five Nights at Freddy's characters nearby, and you can't make any mistakes or any real noise, or it will hone in on you and come and get you, and then you have to do it all over again. And that got really aggravating after a while. I was like, you need to ease off on their presence. Give the player some time to sort of move around and do what you need to do, and then sort of script events in, and then put the animatronic back in the area with you for a while, until you're able to sort of like get away from him, or do a Nemesis style or whatever. Like when Resident Evil had the Nemesis following you, it felt like they were in the world with you, but they weren't always right there where they could hear you. That's what I would have really liked out of this game. So that one was another, put it on the shelf, and maybe someday I'll go back to it and check it out. But it put me off due to that being a little overbearing, in my opinion. So that was on April 10th. On April 12th, at least that was the last time I played, I had my first experience ever in my life with Quake. Quake, sort of like the next evolution in first-person shooter games back in the 90s, sort of like went Wolfenstein to Doom to Quake. But I had never had a chance to play Quake because it was basically a PC-only type game. And unlike Doom and Wolfenstein, its graphical capabilities required a better graphics card than what I had in the 90s. So I got to finally play Quake because LRG put it out for the PS4. I played it for a little while. I only have a couple of trophies. I got a feel for it. I was like, yep, this feels like first-person shooters from that day. And perhaps another time I'll try to go in there and just play. But after I got my feet wet and had a taste of it, I was sort of like, yeah, that's basically what I thought the game was. And so that was enough for me. So then I moved on to playing some Slime Rancher, which I played for a while. Well, I mean, like, for a while, for a couple of days, probably. That was a fine enough game. I don't know. It's not Minecraft. Like, there's no, like, mining and for resources, but you still have to gather resources, and you have these slime creatures and other kinds of creatures on this sort of, like, island, and some of them are, animals that will try to kill you, and some of them are ones that you need to get for resources. But you basically put these slimes on a ranch and hope to get resources out of them. And you can make contraptions that remind me of stuff out of Minecraft, elaborate contraptions that just produce a certain resource. Once a game like that loads up on that kind of gameplay or whatever, I sort of have to like step back and say, okay, that's a little too meticulous and detailed and nerdy for me. So I didn't play a whole lot of that. I then moved on April 3rd to Goosebumps Dead of Night. That turned out to be a little bit better of a horror game than what I was expecting. It suffered from some of the stuff that Five Nights Security Breach suffered from, with persistent creatures that move around while you're trying to take care of your tasks to do without attracting their attention. But you could still move around in the levels and get through it. I was nearing the end of that game. I was pretty sure I was going to beat it. And then I think the level of difficulty spiked a little bit for me, and I wasn't able to complete it. But it wasn't really bad. But somehow or another, that was April 13th. I then went on to spend about a month replaying Cyberpunk 2077, my second playthrough of Cyberpunk, trying a different life path of the three main ones that they do, and just enjoying that game again, especially because it plays better than it did at launch. And I'm sure that by this point it's probably even better. I did start, shortly after I finished that playthrough, I did start a third playthrough with the third and last life path, and also trying a female character instead of male like I had done so far. So when I get the itch for Cyberpunk again, I will have, basically will be the last of the main ways to play the game. The Cyberpunk, I really did end up enjoying it. It's not as good, in my opinion, as Witcher 3, but it's a lot of fun. And they have already talked about, a DLC expansion for it that'll only be for PS5 and Xbox Series S and X, but also a sequel to Cyberpunk. So I look forward to that somewhere down the road, and hopefully they do not release it in a shitty state again. So on May 18th, I got my next completion, and also I think it's my first Platinum Trophy for the year. It's a very short game. It's called Lake, but it was one of my favorite games this past year to play. Very short, indie, narrative-driven game. Walking simulator, you could call it, or driving simulator in this case. Play a postal worker, lady who takes over for her dad while her parents are taking a vacation, and then she gets faced with the choice to stay there in that position and continue to work on, or go back to the city to her big life after interacting with the people of this town. And yeah, it was just the chill kind of game that I like to play in amongst those big juggernauts like Cyberpunk and Horizon. A very big recommendation on that game from me. And then a couple days later, I played and platinumed a game called Hoa, which was a very cute side-scrolling indie platformer style game where you play as like, I don't remember what you play as, like a little fairy or something like that. But all the things that you deal with and interact with in that game are animals and bugs and things like that. It's it's another one of those games where you should probably just like look at some gameplay to understand it. But I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I got platinum on that. And then that was May 20th. On May 26th, I beat the DLC, completed the DLC Garden Flipper for the House Flipper game, which was one of my favorite games of, I believe, 2020, the original House Flipper. So when I was able to get this DLC on PS4, I had to jump on it. Just adds a lot more outdoor stuff to do, gardens and lawns and things like that, mowing your yards, chopping down trees, I want to say. Not a lot of stuff to do inside the houses, but a lot on the outside. Excuse me. So on the 27th of May, I beat Stubbs the Zombie in Rebel Without a Pulse, formerly original Xbox exclusive game that got ported over to the PS4, Xbox One, Switch 2 years ago. I can't remember exactly when that happened, but I finally played it. Really fun. Has that humor and clunky gameplay that's synonymous with like early to mid 2000s. But it was still a fun little game, and I was super surprised that it was something I could beat in basically a day. So that was on the 27th. I dabbled with MLB The Show 21 around that time. I got a couple of trophies, but I know I didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. Because by the 30th, I had beat a short indie game called In Rays of the Light, another walking simulator style game. Interesting look at war, especially like the Cold War times, but from the Russian point of view. It's kind of hard to, I guess, be sympathetic for the way Russian people were feeling about war in like the 70s and 80s, considering Russia the country and what they're doing in terms of war right now. But I still thought it was really interesting. It straddles the line of feeling almost like a horror game or like a horror dream, but it really was about the fear, the anxiety that Russian people had about war when nuclear threat was still in existence. Like I said, especially like in the 70s and the 80s. I think it's a game that's well worth checking out for people who might be interested in seeing that depicted in a game like that. Like I said, all the current events notwithstanding, I think it's an interesting thing to look into. After that, I dabbled with the game Project Warlock, a game that I had pretty high hopes after having played like Quake, Doom, Wolfenstein, some of those older first-person shooters. Project Warlock was sort of like an indie developer's attempt at making that style of game, but in the modern time, and it does it. It nails it. It just it wasn't really doing much for me when I had a chance to sit down. So I moved on to the next big thing for me of the year, and that was Horizon Forbidden West, a game that I completed on July 6th. I put a good month or more into the sequel. Really did enjoy it. Had a lot of fun with it. 82% in terms of trophies. Looks like I have 11 trophies left, but I think there's some in there that I wouldn't ever expect myself to get. Then I moved on to a horror-ish style game, Absolov End of Gods, a game I was having a whole lot of fun with, and then it, in my opinion, it has kind of an unfair final boss battle or final area, and put me off that game. I ended up walking away from that one. And I went and played Bugsnax, and that ended up being my next completion. I completed Bugsnax on July 28th. Really, really loved Bugsnax. Very quirky, very different, creative, like that kind of stuff. From the people who made Octodad, but not dependent on weird physics stuff. It's a good. It reminded me of like a PS2 era game, but just done very, very well. I really, really liked it. So that was July 31st. Or excuse me, Bugsnax I beat on July 28th. I got the platinum for it. That's what I forgot. I got the platinum on the 31st after a couple of days of cleanup. Then I moved over to a game called Oxide Room 104, another like first-person indie horror game that I thought was going to be really, really fun. I was really enjoying it, but it incorporates escape room aspects to it and kind of makes it a roguelike in that if you die, you basically get started over. You get basically like credit for certain events or cutscenes that have happened, but you still have to go solve the puzzles in these rooms and get the items that you had back. And that threw me a bit for a loop. I was like, if I die, I should sort of have a checkpoint and get a chance to go again, not have to do all the stuff I had done before all over again. That was another game, the Away. There was a game that I played called Away something, and it was a roguelike, and every time I would die, I'd have to basically start over, and I'd have the knowledge of what I had done before in my head, but that wasn't what I wanted. So I moved on from Oxide Room 104. I played Sleeping Dogs for a while. I was really enjoying it, except I did not like the fact that it had an emphasis on melee combat. And I know that that was sort of like its claim to fame back then. It was not GTA 5 with shooting and all that kind of stuff. You still shoot, you still have guns and all that, but you have very little ammo. Usually when you run out of ammo, the gun drops and that's it. It's more focused on punching, kicking, combos and stuff, and man, I didn't want that. I was really not into that at all. So I actually ended up stepping away from Sleeping Dogs, and I played Alan Wake Remastered. That was my next completion on August 10th. Alan Wake was good fun. A horror game, what can I say? It's got a good reputation. I'm looking forward to Alan Wake 2. I'm also looking forward to playing Control, that was from the same people, Remedy. Like I said, I don't know what more could be said for Alan Wake than what has already been put out there. So the next day, on August 11th, I beat another indie game called Unpacking, sort of an indie narrative-driven, but sort of like puzzle-style game, where you go through several periods of this particular lady's life as she moves into a place and has to unpack her stuff. And you get like little clues about her life and her world, and you basically have to put stuff in places where it should belong, and the game will basically tell you if you've gotten things roughly where they need to be or not. It's still pretty free, you can still freely do it, but there are still guidelines. I was disappointed in the game, though, in that I was hoping for it to be the game that came to mind most for me was Emily is Away, which is a game about using like AOL Instant Messenger back in the 2000s and communicating with this person that you go to school with that you're like potentially interested in as you go through high school and college, and it's a gut punch emotionally. It was a gut punch for me because I could relate to some of that in my own life. And I was hoping that Unpacking was going to kind of make me feel the same way, and it just didn't really land that emotional part. I could see how it would for other people. It's still a really visually interesting game, and I enjoyed, like I said, I got the platinum on it. I did all the things that I needed to do, or maybe I didn't say that I got the platinum, but I did, and I really enjoyed it. I just, like I said, it was lacking in that emotional punch that I was looking for. So after that, mid-August, I played Pier Solar and the Great Architects. Finally played that. I have an unboxing of the Dreamcast version of that on my channel from years ago. I played it digitally on my PS4. I like it. It's a good JRPG, you know, like modern take on a JRPG. But it has some of the problems that old JRPGs have. The moving around on the screen is really clunky. It was really difficult to move smoothly. Like I think some of the old RPGs did, and I found it to be really difficult. I didn't get very far into it. I have one whole trophy to show for my time with it, and I feel like that game was thumping me pretty hard in the battles. So I'm sure that's more on me than anything else, but it put me off that game. It was another one of those, let's push it back and we'll mess around with it another time. So I spent some time playing Rumbleverse one day, running around in that. That's an online wrestling style, like melee combat game with other people. Online games kind of make me nervous, and the game itself seemed difficult to really latch on to, so I didn't play it for very long, and I moved on. I spent a couple of days with a game called Ari and the Secret of Seasons. It's kind of a poorly rated budget style title, mascot platformer style game. I basically would call it. I liked it, but there were some aspects of it that turned me off. A lot of very lengthy dungeons or areas with puzzles and like jumping, like platforming style stuff, and if you make the slightest mistake in what you're doing, you fall off and have to start over. Got frustrating for me after a while, so I gave that one about a week, and then I moved on, and I played some Pac-Man World Repack at the end of August for a little while. Not bad. Remaster of an old PS1 game. It was fun to get a chance to check it out, and it would be something I would go back to and play and like try to finish up. But that game was not the kind of thing that drew me in to be like, oh, I have to finish this. So in September, I started a game called Spiritfarer, and that was a really fun game. Very interesting premise to that one, trying to like bring some peace to some wayward spirits. Everybody looks like animals, but they're all based off of like human characters. That was just like a chill out and vibe type game, and I definitely did for about a week or so. Then I busted out the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection, and I played and beat Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time Arcade. Those were, to me, the two arcade games from way back in the day that I always wanted to play and beat all the way through. I'm pretty sure I had beat Turtles in Time in the arcades way back, and the original one I just had a chance to play here and there. Good fun, nostalgic stuff. There's so much more stuff on there to play, but those were kind of like the ones that I wanted to jump into and mess around with. Then I decided to go ahead and get Halloween gaming started on the early, and I jumped into Alien Isolation. And I beat that one as of the 29th of September, my second time playing it. It's a good, very, very good game. Really enjoyed it. The quiet, stark nature of moving around on a space station with a few other humans, some weird android robot style characters that sometimes are bad or aggressive towards you, and then of course you've got the alien running around as well. Good time with that one. And then when I beat it, I moved over to a game called The Hunter, Call of the Wild. Excuse me. I bought this game because a few YouTubers that I like played it a few years back when it was like in early access, and it was janky. The physics were kind of weird, and it requires a certain amount of patience that I just don't really have. So I gave some time to it for a couple of days, and then I sort of was off of it. I just had to like get my feet wet. I had played some of the Cabela's games back in like the PS2 era. This is a little bit more realistic than those, but it couldn't hold my attention because there was like no real story to it. They were trying to add some story into it. I remember going to like some sort of a campground or a campsite, and it looked like something bad had happened there, like some evil deeds had been perpetrated. I think the game was even kind of like suggesting that maybe somebody had gotten hurt or murdered there. That was interesting, but overall it was just wander around through the mountains or ponds, swampy areas, and try to shoot a deer or elk from afar, trying not to get killed by bears that were walking around. After that, I jumped into a game called Arcade Paradise. Now, I was enjoying some Arcade Paradise there for a little while. That was a game that's like a sim-style game with an arcade, but it takes place in a laundromat, and you have to run the laundromat to make the money to buy the arcade machines to then try to make an arcade out of your laundromat. So you go in and you would clean, pick up trash, fold clothes, wash and dry the clothes, and do it snappily so that you would get the bonuses for it. And then you would buy some arcade machines that would they wouldn't be any actual games that you would know, but some of them would sort of be based off of arcade games. And that's just the thing. I'm not really big on old school arcade games. Sure, maybe something like the Ninja Turtles, but some of those old arcade style games just don't do it for me anymore. I found the arcade to be the least fun part of it, and the monotonous grind of taking care of the laundromat I was having more fun with. And the game, you know, tries to kind of like shift you from doing the the laundromat stuff to doing the arcade stuff. So after a few days, I kind of fell out of that one, but still a good time. And then I jumped back into Halloween stuff because as of October 6th, I beat Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. That's an interesting game. Starts out looking like a visual novel, sort of like a high school dating game, but devolves into some very dark, bizarro, meta type stuff. It's worth playing and checking out if any of that sounds good. I'm not going to get into any more because I don't want to give any spoilers for it, but I was glad I finally got around to playing that. That game's been out for a while. After that, I moved on to playing some Medieval, which was the PS4 remake of the PS1 game called Medieval. I played that for a little while. It was okay, but that style of gameplay doesn't really do much for me. Excuse me, it didn't really do much for me back then. Still doesn't really do much for me at this point. So I moved on from that. On October 8th, I played a game called Tormented Souls. Tormented Souls is like a kind of like a tank control style Resident Evil survival horror game, and I was really psyched up for this one. I'd been wanting to buy it for the longest time. I finally got it into the collection. I finally sat down to play it, and it kicked my butt in terms of, yeah, I went to all the different rooms that were available. I picked up all the stuff that I could find. I had a few little skirmishes with whatever like zombie style creatures were in the game. That includes me just trying to run away from them because I didn't have enough resources. But I ended up getting pinched in a room and I died, and I had to start over so far back. It super frustrated me. It made me think, you know, like the old gamer that I am. It's like, how did we power through those old games with, you know, without like automatic checkpoints and all that kind of stuff. So I'm putting that one on the back burner. I will come back to it and play it again at some point. I do want to continue on with it, but I had a bit of a frustrating moment with that. I dabbled a little bit with some Hot Wheels Unleashed. I think I got that one on PS Plus. I've been wanting to play that for a while. And then I played it and I realized it's fun. You know, it's a Hot Wheels racing game, but it's also just a racing game, and racing games aren't really my thing anymore. So I put some time in on one day, and then I moved on. And then I went to do what basically ended up being my final Halloween game that I beat on the 21st of October, and that was Prey. The 2017 Prey, not to be confused with the one on the Xbox 360 that only has the loosest ties to this one. But Prey was another version like Alien Isolation, a big space station that you're wandering around in. But you have a lot more active creatures, but they're not really scary. It's more of a suspenseful game, and I think it told a good story in a different way than Alien Isolation did. I actually really did end up enjoying Prey, and I liked being on this space station and having the ability to like go outside of the space station and like jetpack around. You could gather things that you needed. Sometimes you had to go that way and go through a breach in the hull in order to access areas you couldn't get to from inside the station. It's really, really good fun. And I guess one of its gameplay mechanics is that some of the aliens that you're facing can actually mimic into items. So you might walk into an office room and there's chairs and coffee cups and whatever, and you might walk in and some of those things may turn into an alien and attack you. So, good times. I then played some Death's Door. Really wanted to enjoy that. Could not get past the very first boss. Got frustrated because of the timing elements of when to dodge and when to roll and when to jump and when to do all this and that. I fully admit I need to get good in terms of that, or have more patience, but it really just put me off how often I kept dying to the very first boss of the game. So I moved on from Death's Door. I was then going to start my Resident Evil marathon. Excuse me. Man, I talked this long. My throat just keeps getting frog in it. Anyway, for the longest time I've been wanting to start with the very first Resident Evil, but the remake that I never played, and play all the way through, at least up through 6 and the Revelations games. I don't necessarily need to play 7 and 8, aka Biohazard and Village. I don't necessarily need to play them again, but it's been forever since I played the original games, and I never did beat Code Veronica. I never did beat Resident Evil 4, etc., etc. These are a bunch of games that have either been too long in the rear view for me, or I never finished or never even played. So I was going to start on that. I basically had the same problem with the first Resident Evil that I did with that Tormented Souls. I'd go so far and I'd do so much, something would happen, I wouldn't have enough ammo, I couldn't get away from the zombies, and I would die, and then it would put me way, way back in the game, and that really ended up frustrating me. So sadly enough, I dipped out of that pretty quick. But then I went on to my next Platinum and my next completion of the year, Life is Strange True Colors. Loved it. Definitely sits behind Life is Strange and Before the Storm, which are my top ones, but ahead of Life is Strange 2, which is my least favorite of the 4 games, but I still enjoyed Life is Strange 2. True Colors was really good. I liked the characters. Game is pretty compact in that it stays in one main vicinity, one main area. All the other Life is Strange games kind of take you around more locales than this one did, but it still worked out really well. I hope that between Don't Nod and Deck 9, we will continue to see some Life is Strange games, at least for the foreseeable future. I don't want them to go too long, but I would love to see like maybe a true direct sequel to the first Life is Strange would be awesome. Oh, I was wrong about the last Halloween game. I actually got another completion in, although technically I finished it on November 1st, but I played Costume Quest 2, the only game on my completion list that wasn't on PS4. I played it on the PS3. That was actually a fun little like RPG game. I would definitely recommend that. Yeah, that's about all I can really say about that one. Like I said, I had a good time with it. It was compact. It was a short little game, but it was a good time. And then I rolled into a replay of Mass Effect Andromeda that I completed on November 28th. Mass Effect Andromeda is still my second favorite of all the Mass Effects, followed only by 3. Andromeda really gets a short end of the stick because of it released in a glitchy kind of needed a little bit more time in the oven type state, and people wanted the same characters in the same storyline from the trilogy, even though the trilogy kind of wrapped that up. Andromeda had a chance to go to a new place, and I really liked how all the planets were a little bit more open world and bigger, more expansive areas. Some of the planets in the original trilogy games were just sort of like a place to get some resources and not really do much. I don't know. It has problems, sure, but I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. I really enjoyed it, and it was my second full playthrough of the game, and I will definitely play that again at some point down the road. Maybe a full all 4 games back to back to back to back. Maybe. I don't do that very often, but... Okay, the next thing that I played was Victor Vran. I played that for the PlayStation Stars program in order to complete one of the campaigns on there. You had to play one of a handful of different games. I had Victor Vran. I was like, alright, I'll pop that in just to get the gold coins or whatever it was for it. And I actually played that one for a little while. I think I only played it one day, but I got 5 trophies out of my time with it, and I enjoyed it enough that I will go back and play it some more in the future. But then I moved on December 4th to Lawn Mowing Simulator. Boy, Lawn Mowing Simulator was a bit of a disappointment. I guess it was on me to not expect that to be a goofy game like Goat Simulator, or kind of a less serious and less I'm blanking on what the right term would be, but Lawn Mowing Simulator seems like it takes itself too seriously. It wants to literally be a lawn mowing simulator as opposed to House Flipper, where you walk into a house with a sledgehammer and knock a wall down just like that, and then put up a new one and paint it just like that. Lawn Mowing Simulator is very detailed. It's very particular about how you do it. You can mess things up really easily on your lawnmower. And I just kind of wanted to have some goofs with it. So I didn't play that one for very long. I moved on to BioShock 2 Remastered, and that was my next completion on December 6th. It only took me a couple of days to beat it, which was nice. It'd been a few years since I played the first one for the first time, and this was my first time with 2. I think I like 2 a little bit better than the first one. And I'm looking forward to getting into BioShock Infinite in the near future. After I finished that one, I tried to play the ever infamous Agony, the squishy, fleshy, escape from hell game that a lot of people said was really, really bad. And yeah, now that I had a chance to play a little bit of it, I can kind of understand what people were complaining about. Its game design is lacking. There's a lot of stuff about it that's lacking. I got very, very confused and couldn't even figure out where the hell I was going within the first half hour of the game, and I didn't play it for very long. Moved on to The Bunker, which was my next completion on December 8th, and my next Platinum Trophy. Just a perfect homage to the 90s FMV point-and-click games that I love so much. Very well done, very lovingly made. For people like me who love that style of game. I think that's a great game, and I would recommend people check it out. Then I gave some time to Death Stranding. I finally jumped into Death Stranding. I might have finished it by this point if not for some of the other games I'm going to talk about, but Death Stranding is weird. It's Kojima at his fullest expression of all the weird things that go on inside of his head. It's got the, like a pretty star-studded cast. the graphical style to it, using the Decima engine that Guerrilla uses for the Horizon games. It's beautiful, and what's weird about it is I think the most fun that I have is just the actual delivering of packages that get from one place to the next style, except for when you run into the BTs and you have to deal with the crazy sequences. I can't call it combat or battling, but the sequence where you try to get away from them, it can really mess you up when you're trying to do these runs. You might lose your packages or something like that, and you might not be able to immediately get them back, and then they get damaged, and it's stressful. But when you can just sort of like deliver from one place to the next, it actually feels good to do that. When you start to get into all the exposition parts of it, I have actually found myself sort of being like, I don't really know what the hell's going on, so I kind of just like don't care, and I sort of check out until the game lets go of me and lets me just go around and deliver stuff. So we'll see if by the end of that game I get it. But right now I'm just sort of having fun doing that daily grind, I guess. And that leads me into my next completion, my second to the last completion of the year. That was Stray. On Christmas Day I beat that. The cat game, the cyberpunk cat game. Well worth playing. My only complaint was the ending is kind of abrupt and didn't really pay off. You know, what was set up near the beginning of the game. But the gameplay, the story, the world, and all that, very, very interesting. Enjoyed that one quite a bit. And then I played Stories Untold and beat that on December 26th. That was a one session, sit down for a couple of hours, beat it game. I played that game because earlier in 2022 we got the announcements that a bunch of Silent Hill games were going to be coming. And one of those games was called Townfall, Silent Hill Townfall. And it was advertised as being from this company called No Code that did two games, Stories Untold and Observation. And I was interested in knowing what this company had done for some of their previous games. And so I was like, I'm going to check out Stories Untold and Observation. I played Stories Untold, and it was actually really, really interesting. Very different form of horror, but very effective. And I have since picked up Observation cheap off the digital store, so I'm going to check out that one sometime in the near future. But I feel like that particular project is in good hands, and Stories Untold is worth checking out. It's cheap, or it was when I bought it, and I think you'll get a good idea probably of what this Townfall is going to be like. It's horror done from a different perspective. And that does it. I'm very, very sure that the next thing that I played is my first completion of 2023, so I'm not going to bring it up here in this video. So that was it. That was my games played and beat of 2022. Of the games that I know for sure came out in 2022, Stray, Dying Light 2, and Horizon Forbidden West, I would have to put Horizon at the top, then Stray, and then Dying Light 2. I think Lake might also have been a 2022 release, and in that case, I would probably put Lake at number 2, bump Stray to 3, and Dying Light to 4. That doesn't mean I didn't like Dying Light 2. Just really enjoyed Lake a whole lot. So that short period of time was almost as good as that long period of time I had with Horizon Forbidden West. Yeah, I guess that's it. This has been long enough, so thanks for watching this if you have. And yeah, we'll just see you in the next video. Or when the next video is going to be me talking about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII and what it means to me, what I got out of it as a big Final Fantasy VII fan who played it for the first time this year. So that'll be the next video that you see after this. I have no idea when I'll sit down and do it and when any of these get uploaded. So anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.